Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Rumcast. We are the podcast that talks all things rum related with the people who love and shape it. My name is John Gulla, and harvesting rum information with me, as usual, is Will Hookinga. On today's episode, Will and I have the pleasure of catching up with Dan DeHart, the founder of Grander Rum. And Will, it's been 5 years since he was last on the show, so we get to talk to him after that long period of time and see what's going on, as well as talk to him about his newest Grander release, an unaged heavy Panamanian rum that he has dubbed Cane Harvest. But before we get to that, Will, I know you've been a little bit under the weather as of late. Have you recovered your senses yet?
Not all the way. People, you may be able to hear it in my voice now. You'll definitely hear it in my voice a little bit during the interview with Dan. I kept all the coughs and sniffles and stuff out of it, but it gave me sort of a very rich baritone.
It was kind of nice.
Yeah,
I have to say.
Maybe it gave me a better podcasting voice to have a sinus infection. Who knows?
Yeah,
so
we called it Rumcast After Hours, right? Or
yeah.
What was it?
No, the biggest downside has just been not really being able to taste stuff like I typically can.
Yeah.
I feel like my taste buds are at about 40-50%, something like that. So honestly, I feel like I was able to try the Cane Harvest rum maybe the day before we did the interview, and I was starting to feel kind of under the weather, and I don't think I was so, and I haven't revisited it since then, so I still feel like I don't have the best impression of what the rum is like, but I know you've been able to do quite a bit with it, so if you want to share any of your impressions or what you've found it to work well in, I'm sure people would love to know.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky enough to try it the first time back in November, I think, when I saw Dan at a show here in Miami, and then again in late January, early February, and then was able to recently make a daiquiri with it. That was the first thing I thought of, with it just having tasted it neat was, this seems like a good daiquiri rum. And I have to say, I believe I was right, because I'm, not a great mixologist, as we've heard. I don't even want to use that word with me in the same sentence. But I can make a daiquiri. I'm good enough to make a good daiquiri. And so I was really keen to try that with this one. I have to say, this is my favorite daiquiri in the last few years. Wow. And it's up there with me with the Holmes Key Fiji Single Origin and Probitas.
That's
in
high
terms
praise.
of what it does. Yeah. Well, and it's a little different because, of course, this is unaged, and those two that I mentioned have a little bit of age mixed in with them, I think.
Right.
But the cane notes on this one are very present, I think, because of the heavy rum. So you get a little bit more in your daiquiri of the cane, which is what I enjoy about it. And so it still has the right mouthfeel, that balance of a clean, crisp daiquiri. That's what I always look for with it. Yeah. But still the flavor. I can't sacrifice flavor for crispness, if that makes sense.
Sure,
so for me, the right combination of elements of the flavor with that kind of profile really work. I'm psyched about it. This is a really nice product.
Well, I think it's interesting that you put it next to the Holmes Key Fiji Single Origin, and what was Probitas the other one that you said?
Yeah.
Because those are both rums that contain some very characterful pot still rum in them, And I'm sure listeners who are familiar with Grander know they source their rum from Panama. It's all column distilled, and so hearing that type of daiquiri in the same category as those, and I'm not saying you're saying it tastes like those, but just being able to stand up with them and make a great drink is interesting. But I think that also points to what's interesting about this rum and what made us want to have Dan back on the podcast to talk about it, which you mentioned in the introduction that this is a heavy rum. And when we've talked about a lot of Latin American producers over the years, some listeners will be familiar with sort of a common production process that many of those distilleries have is, they have the sort of ultra-light multi-column still distillate, but they also, many of them will produce what they call a heavy rum, which is also column distilled, but often comes from a single column still rather than a huge multi-still, and is not distilled as quite to high an alcohol percentage as the super light rums. And so then they'll blend that heavy rum with the light rum to create various blends, and that's what ends up in many of their products. And you and I have talked a lot about wishing we could taste some of those heavy rums on their own, because many of those distilleries don't tend to release those on their own. So that's what this rum from Grander is it's 100% heavy rum from a Panamanian producer, which also happens to not be Las Cabras distillery, which had to date been the only distillery that Grander had ever sourced and bottled rum from. So that's another interesting wrinkle, is this is a completely different distillery, and we get into talking about which distillery that is and everything with Dan. But it was super interesting to learn about this rum, and I'm really looking forward to being able to taste it in HD, as opposed, I feel like I've been tasting it in 280p or something like that, whatever, the lowest
interlaced video,
240p. I can't remember what the lowest is, but I definitely have not been tasting it in 4K or anything like that. So I'm looking forward to getting back to where my taste buds normally are. Yeah,
full strength will
exactly,
cask strength will. I will refrain from a pat on the back, because number one, it's late, and number two, I don't know if it's quite exactly, but I'll give a finger on the back for me, because I want you to recall that not this past year for predictions, but a previous year, I think it was 2 years ago, I did say there was going to be somebody who was going to bring out a Latin American style, again, for lack of a better descriptive there, heavy rum, unaged, to the market. It was not this one that I was thinking of. I had no idea that Dan was even planning this, and I don't think he did at that point when I said that either. But I will say that I'm glad to see that prediction kind of eventually got there.
Are you sure that was the exact prediction? Because I thought it was something like 100 proof rum from a Latin American producer or something like that. Which
I don't remember now.
We'll go back. We'll do an official, the Rumcast predictions board. We have a vetting process for these predictions and verifying what was, what came to pass and what did not. So we'll take your claim to the board. And you're also on the board, by the way. So
so I have one vote. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have a board meeting on the predictions. We'll pull up the tape from the episode, and we'll determine at that point whether you do get a finger pat on the back or not.
Thank you.
Well, I was thinking about this question but just this idea of getting to taste an unaged rum or a white rum that brings something to the table that we haven't tasted before. So we were just talking about these heavy Latin American rums. We don't typically get to taste them on their own. And so I started thinking about what else would be on my wish list of if I could wave a magic wand and suddenly a rum producer out there would start releasing some type of unaged or aged and lightly aged and filtered rum that they don't put on the market currently. What would my wish list be? And so I came up with some other ideas of these wish list white or unaged rums, John. Okay. And I put the question to you as well shortly before we started recording. This is something I think we both just started thinking about 30 minutes before we hit record. But
very fresh.
I did come up with some rums that I'm actually like, these really do need to exist. So I'm curious to know what you came up with.
Okay. Well, I started thinking a little bit in terms of what's not available that I really wish was available, especially here in the U.S. And I'm sure that when I mention this, you're going to say, well, okay, there have been some unaged releases from this distillery here and there, but not widely released to my knowledge that I'm remembering or recalling right now, and something that I think could be interesting from different perspectives. So, and that's DDL, Guyana.
Okay, yeah.
So, you've got multiple stills there. You've got different things that we could get from some of those unaged rums that I would love to experience, similar in certain ways to the Hamden release that came out a year or two ago.
Unaged Port Morant is really cool.
Yeah. I feel like maybe at some point I've had some unaged Port Morant, but I don't think I've had anything else.
It's always been independent bottlers doing, small limited releases of it and stuff like that. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I would love for it to be inexpensive enough and available enough to try in some drinks.
Yeah.
But to this point, I think, I don't know that that's been able to be done, because even the stuff you can get is higher priced, and I guess you could still do it, but it feels like it's more on the sipping kind of spectrum, if you will. So yeah, that's what I came up with. I mean, I have one more, but I want to hear about yours.
Well, the DDL thought crossed my mind as well, so I'm glad that you raised that. I didn't end up writing it down, But one concept I was thinking for them could be like, because they have some unaged or lightly aged and filtered rums, like
Right.
El Dorado 3, for example. But I don't know what the exact blend components are in that, but I doubt that it contains much, if any, of the heritage stills.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking, like, do a heritage still blend, something that would be a little bit more feasible and, cheaper probably than doing like a 100% Port Morant or something like that. Do a blend of like Port Morant, Versailles, and Inmore or something, like that. And, the bulk of the blend could probably be Inmore, and then you could, put in some flavor bomb stuff with Port Morant and Versailles, but that would be really cool. And, whether they want to age it a little and filter it or just do it totally unaged,
right.
That would be awesome.
Well,
I'd love to see what that looks like.
At a little higher strength also, because the El Dorado 3 is the 40%, right?
Yeah.
And so if you were able to make a heritage blend like that or something along those lines, or even if it was a single still blend, single still product,
sure.
A little bit of a higher ABV on it would be really cool to see.
Okay, well, I'll give you, I've got two that I can share. I'll start with this one. This is probably the top of my wish list, which would be, obviously, we all love Rumfire, right? The unaged Jamaican overproof rum from Hampton Estate. I would love to, because as much as I love Rumfire, sometimes I don't want to use something that's going to be that boisterous and that high strength in a drink,
Okay.
And so what I'd love to see is, Hampton, give me the lower proof, delicious, unaged blend of some of your, you can bring in some of the lower ester marks to the table. I think when we talked about the 8 marks collection, one of the things that really stood out to me was how great, OWH, some of those lower ester rums were unaged, just absolutely delicious. So I think they could do a really cool blend, around between 45 and 50% ABV. So it's still got some power to it, but it's not like a cannon like Rumfire is. And, weave in some of those lower ester marks, and you can blend some of the higher ester stuff as well in small percentages, but something that's just like a little bit more of that mellow Hampton side, I think would just be an insanely delicious product, and something that is just a little bit more versatile. I hate to say Rumfire isn't versatile, because you can use it in a lot of different stuff, but you kind of have to be a little bit careful with how you use it, So something just like a little bit more, something a little bit more laid back, I would say, than Rumfire. I would love to see that.
It's an interesting take, honestly, because, most of the time people like us are asking for the other direction, like we were just talking about. So to have something in that kind of vein or category from a distillery that you still know you love, but to play well with, other things that you might want to do with it, it's interesting.
It's like, give me something that can be like the everyday daiquiri rum, right? Because I love Rumfire in a daiquiri, but that's not the rum I'm going to reach to most often for a daiquiri, right? I kind of, need to be in a mood for it. This is just me personally. I know others may feel differently, but so I'd love the everyday Hampton unaged rum blend would be super cool.
Okay. All right. I would love to see it, and I would love to see how it's used. I feel like you might be a little bit on an island with that one.
I'm on a delicious island with an amazing rum for doing drinks with. I'm not saying I want this to replace Rumfire. There's always a place at the table for Rumfire.
Yeah.
I just like, I think Hampton has a huge range of types of rum that they can make for different contexts and stuff. And I think there's more meat on the bone right now than I think they're leaving some on the table, right? For in terms of unaged products that can be out there for everyday products. I think
it's fair.
Yeah.
By the way, the right response to that was Jamaica as an island.
All right, you got another one?
I do. I'll be quick about it, though. I thought about some other areas that are a little more far-flung that I would like to see some more stuff like that. Mauritius is an interesting place that I think has a lot of distilleries, and I know there's a New Grove unaged product that's out there. Don't see much of it. I think there's maybe one or two other ones from lesser known brands that might have something available. So I'm not saying it's never been done or anything, but from what I know of Mauritius and what I know of their rum making culture, both some of the, the cane juice and the molasses side, I think there could be some really interesting products that they could bring out as well.
Sure.
Different distilleries. So just one that I was thinking of, that as I was kind of perusing quickly my rum collection and looking through it for things as we brought this question up to each other, that one kind of stuck out to me a little also.
Oh, yeah, I'd be down for some Mauritius, some more unaged. I mean, and there's lots of different directions you can go in between cane juice, molasses. There's different distilleries there that do different stuff. So that's certainly something that isn't widely available and accessible in the States. So that would be super cool. Okay, I'm going to throw one more and then we can move on. The last one I had was, we've seen the Mount Gay single estate releases, right? The $400 ones that are, that are all aged so far. Yeah. I think it'd be really interesting to see what a totally unaged Mount Gay single estate rum tastes like. I don't think that's something that they've ever put out. This would be rum being made with the molasses that they are producing, right there. Well, I don't know if it's right at the distillery, but, the distillery has its own mill now, and, they're growing cane. So I'm trying to think of what's a way we could convince Mount Gay to release something single estate and not charge $400 for it. And maybe it would be just going unaged, cheaper to make, easier to put out there, that sort of thing. And you get to taste what that rum tastes like in sort of its...
I was gonna say, people would be interested.
Yeah, in sort of its purest form with minimal intervention. So I'll throw that one out there as well. If we can get the price under triple digits, that would be amazing. So won't hold my breath on that one, but we'll see. All right. Anything else we need to get to before we bring in the interview with Dan?
No, I think that's it. Excited that we have, just to make the transition in and say, excited that we have this heavy rum now in the market, and I'm really hoping that other people give it a try. It's good stuff.
All right. Well, with all that said, let's take a quick break and get over to the interview.
Okay, so we are here with Dan DeHart, the founder of Grander Rum. And Dan, of course, you're a veteran of the show. Welcome back. It's been 5 years. Can you believe it? 5 years since you were last on. This podcast is still going. We're very happy to have you back.
Well, thank you, John. I'm really excited to be back. And yeah, I can't believe it's been 5 years. It's time has flown by.
We've got a lot of questions about that and what you've been doing in that time, of course. And of course, I wanted to mention, so Dan, I was at one of our recent shows here in Miami that you were also at, and how this all came together was I've seen you, because you're in Florida and I'm in Florida, we get to see each other a couple times a year at these shows, the rum shows that we have here in town. And I could tell something was a little bit different, Dan, when I saw you this time, and it was in November and then again in February. There was a little bit of a glimmer in your eye as you were there at the table. And come to find out, it was really you being excited about this new product that you have, the cane harvest product, which we are going to talk plenty about today, and you get to tell us more about. But it was nice to see, that there was something kind of new for Grander, and that you're so excited about it is what kind of got us excited about it too.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you recognize that, because you're right. I'm very excited about it, and it's very different and unique for Grander as well.
Well, before we get to there, I think it's good for us to start back with. It was 2020 last time you were on the show.
Sorry to interrupt you, John. I was actually going back and listening to that episode earlier today, which was our 5th episode ever. And we were a little more green. It was such a jarring experience because at the beginning of it, before it goes into the episode, there's a little note from me at the beginning, because I think we'd gotten off our schedule a little bit, because this was like the intro note is like, hey, because of this new COVID-19 pandemic, we've been off our schedule a little. And I was just getting all these pandemic flashbacks. It was terrible. But the interview was a nice palate cleanser out of that, though. I just had to throw that in there.
I don't even want to think about that at this point. We're so past it. But it has been that 5 years. So, Dan, I wanted to kind of start with maybe saying, since that time in 2020, it was early 2020, first of all, what have you been up to, right? And I know that there's been a lot going on, but more so I wanted to talk just generally about the rum industry and your perspective on it, and see, how do you think that in those 5 years, anything in the rum industry has shifted? What have you noticed? And maybe how have you responded to that through Grander?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I mean, while 5 years on one hand doesn't seem like a long time, and especially when you're just running all the time, but it has been, 5 years is a long time. So, from John, I guess from my perspective, yeah, I definitely have seen an uptick in interest in premium rum across the board. And I remember when I first got into this, trying to sell I had one SKU when I started, and
Yeah.
I would go visit retailers, and it was not easy because my rum was, it wasn't the cheapest rum out there, and it wasn't the oldest age statement
Was
on
that
the
the eight
bottle as
year?
well.
Was
That
the
was the
8 year the
Yeah,
first one, too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 8 year, and it was a real difficult, tough conversation to have as to, why would someone want to spend, I think at that point it was 29.99, on an 8 year old when they can get a 23-year-old for, the same price. And so, and I would have those conversations. Well, this rum is different. Let me explain. And, it was very difficult. Whereas now going into retailers and talking about rum, it's a very different reception. And it's because, it has to be because more consumers are coming in expressing interest in premium rums and exploring the category. So that's been very nice. But with that said, I may have to be honest. Rum still has a long way to go, and particularly in the United States. It hasn't popped like bourbon, and it hasn't popped like tequila. So there's still massive amounts of consumers out there that still have no idea about rum,
Yeah.
or have perceptions.
And specifically with the ABV, because I know we talk about this, but your rums are either cask strength, or your 8 year was 50% ABV. Is that still correct?
Yeah, 90 proof, so 45% ABV.
45. Sorry.
Right.
Faulty memory on my part. But so at 45% ABV, did you initially, like back then? I'm assuming you're like, well, oh, this is a higher proof or percentage than other rums out there on the market.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, is that something that you still find, or is it like, oh, 45, it should boost it up to 46 or 50?
Right. No, that's funny. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're exactly right. When back in the day, I mean, 45, that was kind of a standout in the crowd on the rum shelf, because most, it was 80 proof or 40% ABV. So yeah, certainly I would go in there and talk about that, and that was a big deal. But now that's not as uncommon as you're aware. It is. It's funny when you still go into some liquor stores. It certainly is. But across the board, yeah, it's not that uncommon. So yeah, I mean, all the rums have been proofed up more, and I think because of the consumers, some of them obviously want that. So yeah, I think rum has made good strides across the board, and that's been very welcoming, particularly from people like myself, and I'm sure like you all. But again, we still have a long way to go, and I think last year it certainly did not help. I mean, inflation certainly was incredibly challenging. I mean, it's funny, you talked about COVID, and that actually was really good for business. COVID, because everyone was buying liquor at the liquor store and making their cocktails at home, and so that created a nice bump in the market, and then of course we had a bit of a hangover after that. But then we had the inflation, which really kicked in last year, and so not just rum but spirits across the board in the U.S. took a hit, and so that certainly has made things certainly challenging in certain aspects. So it's been a crazy 5 years when you look at it. But I'm still incredibly excited. I think there's so much upside to rum, and I have, the one thing I will say is I have. I live in Orlando, so I have done a show called the Orlando Whiskey Festival, and I've done it. I think ever since I came out with my product, and as the name suggests, it's whiskey, and that's the focus, and that the consumers are focused on that. And so I was the oddball out there, and every once in a while I get someone coming up to the table.
They put you in a corner off by yourself over there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would get the worst table, and actually I was. I remember after a couple of years they're like, yeah, we're just going to stick with whiskey, no rum. But that lasted a year, and then actually said, "No, actually, we want you back." And
I can't believe they pushed you out. You should have. You should have said, "You're gonna have to try harder than that if you want me back now."
Yeah. But I will say, the last 2 years, going to that show has been incredible from the standpoint that from opening to the very closing, it's nonstop pouring interest and rum. And I've had so many people come up and say, I am getting into rum. I'm really exploring it. I really am starting to, explore this. And it's very exciting to see from this whiskey show 5 years ago, I couldn't get anybody to come to the table, to I'm worn out at the end of the night because we are just constantly pouring and talking about grandeur and rum and just helping people, just encouraging them to go down that category. Because I will still say, it's the most diverse category out there.
One of the things we talked about this in your first interview. I know I think cane harvest is a little bit of a new chapter, but for most of Grander's history, you've continued to source distillate from one distillery in Panama, Las Cabras, I believe. I was interested in, as your relationship has grown with them, as your product line has evolved, you've done a lot of different things. I was kind of curious to know, from your perspective, has the selection that you've had to choose from your supplier, Las Cabras in Panama, has that evolved over time in the last 5 years? Are you seeing different things, or is it just more of the same at different age statements now? How has that kind of evolved?
Gosh, that's a great question. I think the way when I look at it, the product that I have chosen for Grander has stayed fairly consistent, in terms of what I pull from. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of products that I would grab that I no longer see. And so I used to sell an 8-year-old single barrel.
Yeah. Yep.
That was one of my favorites.
That was, yeah. And you're not alone. But I remember, I'm not sure which year it was, but I went down to collect barrel samples to bring back, and the 8-year-old barrel samples were different, and ever since then, I have not been able to see that particular instance of I've got different ideas or thoughts about it, but that's fine. That kind of product, retired, and who knows, that may come back. But that was really the only big change. Other than that, the biggest thing, Will, for me and John, is I became much more involved in deciding and the product itself. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, obviously you're very much aware of my cask finishes. So
yeah,
that is me 100%. I mean, that's taking typically what I've done is I've taken my 8-year-old blend for Grander rum and have then evolved that in cask finishes. But obviously getting the cask is from me selecting the cask and sending those down to Panama and filling them up and managing that. Since 5 years ago we talked, I came out with trophy release. And that's a fun product for me because I'm actually creating the blend myself. And that blend it's a mixture of cask that I'm finishing in, and it's cask that I'm able to tap into from Las Cabras. And I pick out the rums, the barrels, and blend them together. And so each release is unique. It's all dependent on the barrels, and I'm picking out barrels at least 8 years in age, typically up to 15. So that's kind of the scope of the play box I play in.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's about trying to find and find really interesting. I mean, the interesting thing about barrel aging, whether it's just strict aging or finishing, is, each barrel has its own fingerprint.
Yeah.
And so each barrel is unique and different. And, the wood is different. I mean, it's similar, but it has its differences. So for me, it's a lot of fun picking out those. So when you answer your question, yes, I've seen a couple other products become more elusive out of Las Cabras. Some products, no, we've been very consistent on, but I've really evolved, I guess, how I've worked with those products myself to evolve my offering as a result of that.
Yeah. With the trophy releases, has the size of those grown over the years? Like, are you doing more casks in the blend now, more bottle out turn, or are they, about roughly the same as they've always been?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the size of the batches have been relatively similar. That hasn't changed. I mean, I just typically, what I've done to date is when I feel that it's time to bottle my next batch, I do it. But I try to keep it under 15 barrels. I mean, many times it's been under 10 barrels. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I have come to realize that blending is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
and hard, and there's really it takes an artistic ability to do it well. So I on one side, I'm a little, I guess, intimidated trying to blend like a massive amount of barrels together.
I would be too. So, doing 10 together sounds intimidating to me.
And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Is okay. And it's hard. I mean, I think the last one I came out with, it took me a while because I have, and typically what I've done in the past is I find a barrel or two that really I find interesting.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, and then I'm like, okay, that's going to be the foundation.
I'm like building the blend around these
backbone. Exactly. Yeah. That's going to be the backbone. And now the challenge is finding other barrels that will complement that, or maybe even enhance it. And the last blend or batch that I was working on, I had my 1 or 2 barrels picked out, and then in my catalog, I'm like, oh, okay, this barrel is going to work really well with this. And so I add that in there, and only to find out that it actually killed it. and I'm like, and of course when I'm doing this, it's really test batches. I'm not doing massive batches.
I was going to say, you're test. That's a big mistake if you're doing a 10 blend, 10 barrel blend.
Exactly.
You pour that one in. And so what we need to invent is something that removes a mistake of a blending. I guess that would be a time machine.
An unblender, right?
Yeah. An unblender. We need an unblender.
Yeah.
No, it sounds smarter, Dan, to do it in a sample size of that.
Yeah. At least I was smart enough to do that. But it's just incredibly challenging, difficult, and so I really have grown to respect those, legit master blenders that are out there. I cannot call myself a master blender by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I've been very pleased with my trophy releases. I get a lot of positive feedback from people. A lot of people really enjoy the taste, the flavors, what I'm doing with that. So it's incredibly pleasing to receive that feedback.
Well, and it's a chance for you to, I mean, every release you do is a chance to do this in some ways, but I think in that release in particular, it's a chance to really show your unique perspective, right? Like you're the only one who could have made this blend, right? So right. That makes those kind of special, I think. I always like getting to taste products like that from people who are sourcing products, because it gives you a sense of them, right, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing, it's interesting to hear from your, the evolution of what you said from where you started to like, okay, I know your reputation has always been on essentially highlighting the raw beauty of Panamanian rum with that minimal intervention, right? No additives. This is what it is, and you're getting it full on in the front. And then having to evolve into saying, okay, well, how am I going to evolve what I do into a process of balancing that with this, as we mentioned, secondary maturations and cask finishes and the less common types of thing, but still maintaining that perspective of saying this is the raw beauty of Panamanian rum with that finish on it. Have you considered how that kind of hangs together in terms of the perspective of the brand and how you continue to evolve it?
I'm chuckling because one answer is no. And I'll say no in the sense that I've always, for me, I was thinking about this the other day. The whole name of Grandeur, I mean, of course, it's a nickname for a marlin fish weighing over 1,000 pounds.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But there's a whole thing behind. There's people out there that sport fish, and to be fair, I'm all in favor of catch and release. But there's a whole journey and world of going out there and trying to find one of these beautiful fish and find them, and many people will never, they'll seek and never find it, but they really enjoy that journey because you're usually doing it with friends, and you're out there with the experience, and then if you're lucky enough to find, catch and release one of these beautiful things, that's great. So for me, it's part of the journey is exploring new flavors and aromas. Yes, I'm very pleased and I'm very happy with the raw Panamanian rum, but I'm very curious as an individual, and so I do like I like drinking a Scotch sometimes, or a bourbon, or whatever the case may be, or testing out a Madeira or whatnot. But I like bringing some of those nuances and layers of flavor and aromas into this Panamanian rum, just to see how it works and evolves. And so, balancing. Hopefully, I won't put anything out that's incredibly disgusting. Although I think some people would say I have done that. But for me, it's all about ensuring that I want to bring out something that the quality is there, that I know is going to capture the palate of some people. You can't capture the palate of everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's impossible. But I'm out there trying to create something that. At the end of the day, I want to enjoy drinking it myself, and so that's the biggest litmus test.
Yeah.
On the note of single casks, we've mentioned a few times you've done a lot of different ones over the years, different Scotch ones, different bourbon, rye, I think maybe even some agave casks in the mix, fortified wines and such. Mm-hmm. What have been some of the most pleasant surprises? And then on the other hand, have there been any well, this didn't really go, kind of how I was hoping it would?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I have done a lot of cask finishes, and of course, you don't always know what you're going to get. In terms of pleasant surprises, there's actually been a number of them. One example, I would say I did a finish in Jack Daniel's, and it turned out, actually, I thought, really good. And that was a surprise for me because I don't like Jack Daniel's. I mean,
sure.
You won't find it in my home bar. It's just the taste profile just is not mine, or it's not for me. But the barrels, actually, I felt worked incredibly well with the rum. It actually makes it a little bit sweeter as well, that barrel. So that finish really shocked me because I was expecting personally not to really enjoy it, but I was wowed by it. The agave is, I think, I've really enjoyed as well. But the agave finish, though, is, I mean, it's a tequila barrel, but it doesn't have as strong of tequila notes that maybe you would think. But I think it's beautifully put together, though. So I think that's been a pleasant surprise. I mean, the most popular barrel finish is toasted oak finish. So
the toasted oak is really nice. It's really good.
Yeah, that's been the I guess hands down the most popular finish I've done, and that's basically we're getting freshly dumped ex-bourbon barrels, and these are actually heavily toasted barrels, and the distillery that used them basically is or essentially they're doing a finish. So they're taking their bourbon and finishing it for maybe 6 months on average, in these brand new, heavily toasted barrels, and they dump them. So the barrel is incredibly fresh. It's virtually new, and we ship them down to Panama and fill them up. And just those, those characteristics that you would just think of a toasted barrel. The vanilla and caramel and almost like a toasted, marshmallow. But that's been incredibly popular, and as a result, I mean that also kicked out a new product of mine called Toasted Oak. Surprise, but it's a small batch offering because I had so many people asking me, hey, I want this, but you could only get it if you were able to go to the retailer who actually bought the barrel.
Yeah,
and it was limited to that retailer. So for me, I'm like, okay, I need to create a product that I can get out across all of my distribution network. And so I've done that. I'm very excited about that. But in terms of the ones that didn't go right, I would say, there was, in my opinion, there was one, and I wouldn't say it was a failure, but I think it was the most entertaining one. And it was the peated Scotch finish.
I thought this might come up.
and those were Ardbeg. So, it's very funny. When I do rum shows, it's the one barrel that I do always get asked, hey, do you have any more of that left? The people who love it absolutely can't get enough of it. Yes. But the people who hate it, they can't hate it even more. and it's rightly down to, and let's be honest. I mean, peated Scotch is incredible. It's the alpha male of the barrels I've picked, and so the influence is unmistakably, peat, and so it attacks the rum aggressively, and it plants its flag on the rum. Yeah. And it says, I'm here, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Deal with
it. And, see ya. And so, so I do get to, you'll get people say, look, I mean, you bastardize the rum. And I get that, and I respect that. But, with a grain of salt, hopefully people, yes, if you put that peated Scotch finish next to a peated Scotch, you would know there's a massive difference between the two. I mean, it's a rum, but the peated Scotch is out there. It's incredibly just massive. But people, like I said, I mean, there's people out there that can't get enough of it, and there's people out there that just they don't want to see it ever.
Yeah,
John, which one of those are you?
I'm in the latter group. I love many of your Grander releases, and that Toasted Oak is amazing. And many others. I think I have, a few bottles in my home bar of Grander right now, and that's after the ones I drank and that are already gone. So I've got plenty, but yeah, for whatever reason, I can't jive with it's like you said, it's just so present, and I'm okay with an Ardbeg once in a while. Like I can drink an Ardbeg on its own once in a blue moon, but yeah, it's like you can pass a peated Scotch barrel in a room that has rum in it, and it's gonna affect it. Like that's how crazy it is, and it's just not for me. But yeah. So,
by the way,
fair enough.
We've been throwing the word finish around a lot. I know some bottlers, some producers don't like to use the word finish for, you know, when they do a secondary maturation. Are you generally staying within a specific time frame with these? Like, is it generally going to be under a year, or do you have some where you go, you know, multiple years for these? And would you still call those a finish at that point?
So, I mean, typically mine are, they're going to be at least 9 months in the barrel, but I would say on average, my barrel finishes are going to be at the year mark.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit longer. So, and that's a long time, and I understand that, but I'm happy with that. I'm really happy with the you know, what it does in terms of, is it finish or double maturation or what? I mean, I don't know. I don't get too hung up on the terms myself. I know some people do. I don't know technically what would be the split. Like, at what point does it become, you know, is it always a secondary maturation? I mean, I guess, you know, technically maybe it is. I don't know. You know, and what is a finish? So I personally don't get caught up in that. I'm happy to use both. But I can see, you know, maybe over a year, maybe I can see using the term secondary maturation makes more sense because it has spent more, you know, a finish maybe I would say is less than a year, and over years maybe a second maturation. But you know, like I said, that's my opinion.
I guess it would also be determined by how long the primary aging was as well in comparison, right? Or at least that would be a thought for me, is if it's a roughly 10-year-old rum and then you're putting it in for a year, that's 10% of the time it's totally aged, versus if something was in, you know, an ex-bourbon for 2 years and then you put it in something different for a year, it's 50%, or my math's probably bad there, but you get my idea. So yeah, I think that's an interesting kind of way to think about these terms as well, as how long versus the original barrel aging. All right. We're going to turn the corner here because I want to talk with you about the highlight, which is your latest release, the Cane Harvest, which is a Panamanian white rum. And we haven't seen, to my knowledge, that I can remember, a white rum released from Grander before. So I wanted to ask you, you know, how did this all come about? And what can you tell us about it, and how you decided this had to be a part of your portfolio?
Well, I'm not sure if I ever mentioned it in my first interview with you guys, but I certainly mentioned it with other people that it was never my intention of doing a unaged white silver rum, whatever.
You did mention that, actually. I made a note when I was listening this morning. You were talking about, you know, we were asking you about when you were initially sampling stuff, and you said you had no interest in white rums at that point. Yeah,
right, and that's true, and that is, you know, that is absolutely true. I did not, and it's, upon reflection, I would say it almost reflects my journey in the rum world to a degree. You know, for me, I was always interested in aged spirits, primarily bourbon and whiskeys, aged, and so that was my world, and that's all I had interest in. I really did not have interest in stuff straight off the still. So when that wasn't how I got there, but when I look back, I'm like, I think my own personal journey in rum had led me here, and really begin to appreciate the beauty of something that's straight off the still. But how I got here. So interesting enough, a couple of years ago, I had, do y'all remember a brand by the name of Caña Brava?
Yeah.
Yes, we do. We've discussed it a few times.
Yeah. I feel like I had one of the last bottles of Caña Brava.
Yeah, now it just makes people mad because they can't get it anymore, right?
Exactly.
That was a joke on Caña Brava, but all right, that's fine.
But I you know, that was made or produced by the same guys that produced my rum, and so you can't get Caña Brava now. You know, maybe there's a Dusty somewhere in some back store of a shelf, but I had a couple of people approach me, some people who own some bars and some who didn't, but said, "Hey, have you thought about, you know, creating Caña Brava, but under Grander. And I said, well, no, I haven't. And I had multiple people ask me, and I'm like, I mean, maybe there's some interest out there in this white rum space. And so I said, well, maybe I need to look at it. And so I went down to Panama, and I got some samples back of Caña Brava-esque. But I also brought back samples of maybe what a Grander-esque white rum would look like. And so I had 3 samples and brought it back to the U.S. and I sent it out. I shipped out to some of the people that had inquired these 3 samples, and I went and saw some bars and at the end of the day, it was none of the 3 samples were. Everyone was like, "Yeah, this is good stuff. This is good," but it was nothing exciting.
Yeah.
Nothing really compelling for me to go down the journey. And if I'm on Grander, I don't want to use additives. So one of the samples excluded itself from me even wanting to bottle that.
Oh, okay. Did you know that when you got the sample, or was that like a surprise?
It was a surprise to me. Yeah. But I had a discussion and was informed.
Yeah. Okay.
So could have been worse. You could have liked that one and then found that out.
No doubt. No, this is the best thing ever. So but the reaction when I took it to bars and I sat down with people, everyone was nice. Yeah, it's good. But it was, it would, to me, the samples I brought out, I'm like, this is going to fade into this, no man's land of white rums that just, is not interesting. And I'm not going to be able to bring it at a price point that's going to be
competitive.
To match that kind of low key reception. So and at that point I'm like, okay, my initial thought, just this, why did I waste my time even thinking about this? And so it was December of 2023. I'm down in Panama, and I am meeting with someone, and they said, "Hey, I've got this aguardiente. I want you to try it." And I said, "Yeah, okay." And so they brought it to me, and fresh off the still. And I looked at it was a little sample bottle, and I looked at it, and it was 90% ABV.
Whoa.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. I'm like, you want me to try this?
So you dove right in.
Like,
yeah.
Is this to clean my hands or?
Yeah. It's just left over from COVID. And,
right.
But I'm like, okay, I'm quite, nervous about trying this. And so I opened it up, poured it in a glass and nosed it and very cautiously.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to pick up some, essence of sugarcane. And I'm like, oh, okay, hold on. And then I tasted it, expecting it to just, I don't know what.
Melt your face off.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't. It did not melt my face off. And I actually could taste flavors and the aromas that came from the glass and the flavors. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? I've never had anything like this out of Panama. And so at that point, this was not from Las Cabras. And at that point, I'm like, this is it. I mean, I'm like, this is amazing. This is, it's unique.
Yeah.
It's bold. It's got flavor. I mean, and for a 90% ABV, it's almost, dare I say, smooth. It's not, but I mean, actually, I didn't die drinking it.
Yeah. You didn't go blind, anything. You're good.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm like, wow, it just blew my mind away. And so at that point, I'm like, I've got to go. I have to travel to this distillery I've got to meet with them. I need to talk with them. I've got to explore this. I kind of understand what is going on here. So that took 3 months between the introduction and making my travels back down to Panama.
Okay, it didn't take you 3 months in Panama. You didn't like trek with like a big stick down there.
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
you just started walking.
It was... That's the next time. I'm going to invite you on that journey, John.
That would have been a good story. I'm just saying. Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have made it, but I sat down, met with the folks at the distillery, and sat down, and they're like, "Well, so what can we do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'm really interested in bottling this rum." And they're like, "Really? You're really?" I'm like, yeah, I really am. Not at 90%, mind you. And they're like, "Okay, well, yeah, I'm sure I think we can do that." And the good news is they were very familiar with Grandeur Rum, the brand.
Okay, that helps.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and they had respect for my brand and what I had done. Mm-hmm. And so I think that helped them receive me. So what I did when I went there and I talked to them to say, "Okay, is this even a possibility? Can we work together?" And they said yes. And so I'm like, "Okay, I need to bring back samples because I love it. I think it's interesting, but I need validation. I want to take these samples back to the same people that I took those other samples to.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to them." And I did. And the reaction was incredible. I mean, it was.
Did you give it to them at 90%?
No, I didn't. But I do have some in my office that maybe I will just for fun. But the reaction was night and day difference, and I'm like, okay, this I'm excited about. It stands out. It's unique. I felt like I discovered something in Panama. I mean, of course, it's always made, but it's just not. It's not. I haven't seen it bottled like that ever.
Right.
Yeah, it's not available, and so it was kind of a weird journey because I never really set off in this path to do it, and and I kind of told you how it led me there, but I'm very grateful that I don't think 5 years ago I never would have done this, and so it's back to my point of I don't know if I would have appreciated 5 years ago, to be honest. I think now I have a far greater appreciation for this unaged rum world. I mean, and not just what I'm doing. I mean, the agricole and the Jamaicans, all this, being able to taste really the raw essence of that distillate to me is so interesting and exciting. And so this. And what blew my mind out of this particular product is the fact that I felt like I could nose and taste sugarcane, even though it's a molasses-based rum. And it really shocked me that the flavors and aromas that I was getting from this, it just blew my mind away.
Yeah, I have a bunch of questions. Going back, when you first talked about being introduced to the rum, you mentioned that someone said, "Hey, I've got this aguardiente for you to taste." And I think some of our listeners, when they hear that word aguardiente, the first place they might go is, some of the Mexican rums from Oaxaca that we've talked about on the show that are fresh cane juice rums. But I think, if I'm remembering correctly, aguardiente is also a term used in other Latin American distilleries, especially the kind that make these molasses-based, column still rums. It's correct, right, that basically the first distillation rum before it's redistilled is referred to as aguardiente, and that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's I thought you were going to first say many people would think about the Colombian aguardiente.
That's another one too. The anise flavor.
Right.
Aguardiente is this word that's it means so many different things in so many different places. So it can get confusing very quickly. Mm-hmm.
And it's not just rum. I mean, it's in Europe, and so. But Will, you're correct. It's really that first run, and and I guess a less scientific term, it's often referred to as heavy distillate, and then the runs after that essentially, what they're doing is, they're setting aside heavy distillate, and then they're taking the other part of the heavy distillate and they're refining and redistilling that into what they call the light distillate. And then for Panamanian rum, and I think also, in Cuba,
Puerto
you see
Rican,
this as well.
Cuban,
you're blending those two together, and that really forms the basis. And then that's what's aged and whatnot. Interesting enough, I do label this. On my back label, I do refer to aguardiente, but on the front label, I call it a rum because in the U.S. it's technically a rum. But if I sold it in Panama, I could not call it a rum.
Interesting.
In Panama, it has to be at least 3 years aged to be acknowledged as a rum.
And so this is totally unaged then?
Completely unaged.
Okay. That was my other question, just because, Caña Brava was in an aged and filtered rum, which is, what we typically see from quote unquote white rums from Latin American countries,
right.
2, 3, 4 year, whatever, age it and then charcoal filter it, take all the color out and bottle it.
And to that point, I mean, this is not, if you pick up a bottle of Cane Harvest and you're expecting a traditional Panamanian rum or, Spanish style rum, you're going to be in for a surprise. It's not.
Right. It's not like Florida Caña 4-year Don Q Cristal. No. It's very different from those.
No, it's very different. And so in fact, it was funny. I have to say, one of the rum shows, a gentleman came up and explained to me how I missed the mark. I mean, this is not at all a Panamanian rum, and I agreed. I said, "You're absolutely correct. It's not a traditional Panamanian rum, but it is Panamanian."
Right,
rum.
Yeah.
It's in the raw scent, sense, and so it's it's a very different animal, and I'm really excited to share this.
Are you able to share the name of the distillery that it comes from?
Yeah. I mean, it's Tachiza. It's let me make sure I get it right. Centro Industrial Chiricana.
Okay.
So they I have I've always, you guys know, I've always been transparent about grandeur. And so this distillery, they have their own brand called Carta Vieja, which you may or may not have seen.
I've seen it before.
Yeah. So their brand, it's and again, if you tasted my Cane Harvest, I think 9 times out of 10, or most times, you would never even relate it back to this distillery because their products are very different. It's not going to be heavy distillate. It's, they're very much in the traditional Panamanian style rum. And so I think that's, kind of one of the appealing things when I met with them is, you want a bottle of this? Yes. I think there's a market for it. I think there's going to be some really interested people out there to discover this and actually discover what really is going on at your distillery. I mean, it's a beautiful rum it's really has a lot to offer. And so this distillery is in just outside David, Panama, which is actually near the Costa Rica border.
Okay.
So it's a rural area of Panama. I think I've been told that's where all the Panamanian food really originates from that area, and cattle and everything. So very steeped into agriculture. And in fact, also I'm under the understanding that this is the oldest distillery in Panama.
Okay.
They're by no means the largest.
It's in the name of the Vieja, right? Carta Vieja means old.
Yeah, exactly.
Paper.
And right. But it's beautiful. I mean, the sugar cane is grown right there at the distillery. It's driving up to it. It's a really pretty scene, and it's small. It's a really neat place.
So you mentioned taking some samples to some of the bartenders who had been, kind of telling you, hey, you should bring something like Caña Brava back. Is did you, once they signed off on it, were you like, okay, I'm putting in the order? I don't even know like how big an order initially was. I'm sure it was, not small. Is there other stuff you do to put this rum through its paces? Because this is not like one of your past releases, I would imagine, well, and maybe I'm being presumptuous here, but I would imagine that you might have to think a little bit more about cocktail applications with this than a typical grander rum. So are you, in the cocktail lab at home making drinks? Do you just try to entrust that to professionals? Like, how did you put this rum through its paces to make sure it was what you wanted?
So, yeah, I mean, that's, so yes, my wife is, I think I'm driving her crazy. I'm making so many cocktails with this.
Yeah.
And I'm always, every day I'm coming home with new stuff because I'm experimenting. I'm like this. And so, yes, I have done a lot. I am by no means an expert in cocktails. I mean, there's,
join the club.
I'm on the very low end. Of
we're right there with you.
Good. So there's people out there that are far better. And so, but I've been having fun. And what's been fun for me with this product is, and this is, I'm sure, true with other products as well, but I'm making cocktails, it's not just rum cocktails. So I've been searching gin-based cocktails.
Sure.
And it bodes very nicely into that. And, even some tequila-based cocktails. But, so I've been playing with rum cocktails and finding gin and tequila, and I've just been playing, and it's been a lot of fun. And so sometimes it works out beautifully, and other times I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm showing my amateur side because it's not really good.
Yeah. In my head, Dan, your house now has one room dedicated to blending, beakers, stuff like that. One room dedicated to cocktail making, right? You got a tiki setup or a bar setup where you're doing that. And then you've got one room that's your full bar where you have all your rums in, right? That sounds like the ideal setup.
That would be. I'll have to think about that. You need to come over and design it.
There we go. Well, that would be my wife that would help with that.
I barely trust myself to, like, especially if I'm trying a new rum that I've never had before. And people will probably laugh at this, but I barely trust myself to have a strong take on like making a daiquiri with it, just because like I've had my own daiquiris at home and I've had daiquiris made by actual bartenders, and the ones they make are always way better than mine.
Yes.
So I try to, and this is just me, I'm not saying everyone who's not a bartender should subscribe to this. I probably just suck at making daiquiris. But I try to keep it like as simple and consistent as possible when I'm trying rums like this. So, and part of this was also just because this sinus stuff came over me, so I didn't want to start trying it in daiquiris and stuff because I knew my palate was going to be shot anyway. But I did try it. One thing I'll do a lot is just rum and club soda or something like that, just to really see how it changes in context with another ingredient. And so I did the Cane Harvest with Topo Chico. And what struck me about it was I got this, and I don't know if this is what you guys taste in it, but what jumped out of the glass for me was like a huge note of like vanilla cream, kind of. It was such like a creamy kind of rum and had this really prominent note of vanilla, which is also why I wanted to know about if it had been aged or not, and the fact that it hasn't and it still has that is really interesting to me. But again, I don't know if that's the product of just that combination of ingredients or what, but that really jumped out at me when I was trying it a few days ago.
Or your sinus infection.
It could also have been the early signs of the sinus infection too. Yeah.
I'll follow along in saying I really do appreciate the mouthfeel as well, and I think it's got that heavy mouthfeel to it that's got creamy almost nature. I don't know if I picked up as much as you did, Will, on vanilla, but I did put it in a daiquiri. And yes, I will take your point that my daiquiris versus a professional, bartender's daiquiris are never
I didn't say yours, John. I said mine. I'm speaking for myself. So yes, for all I know, your daiquiris are fucking awesome. I've never had one of them. So
maybe they are. It sounds like we need a DAC off next time we're together.
Yeah, I think so.
We're gonna have to do this. And but I really, Dan, I was going to say that it's super, to me, this shines in a daiquiri amazingly, and that was where I was really, really enjoying it. I would say right now, we had the Home Ski Fiji that we've always said we really like our daiquiris with, and it's one of my favorites. This is right up there exactly with that. The Cane Harvest and that one to me are neck and neck. I haven't tried them like AB yet. That's on my list to do.
Right.
But man, it made just a phenomenal daiquiri.
That's awesome.
Was really, it was really nice.
I appreciate it. Well, hey, Will, real quick, I had a similar story because I make daiquiris as well. But I was we have a great bar here called Otto's High Dive in Orlando.
Yes,
and they make some incredible. I mean, it's incredible rum centric, and the cocktails are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a little. I mean, this literally came in January this year, this rum, so it's brand new. But we had a little event there for the folks from Florida Rum Society. And anyhow, it wasn't on the menu. They had a couple of cocktails made up. But I'm like, hey, make a daiquiri for me. I made it. And which they did. And I tasted it. I'm like, why is your daiquiri so darn good?
Exactly.
I mean, it's nowhere even near this. I'm like, what? I mean, isn't it like one of the most simplest cocktails in the world? And what am I doing wrong? I said, okay, you have to tell me how you do this, please. I beg you. And their daiquiri, they were using St. James, the cane syrup.
Ah, okay, interesting.
And I've been playing with my own simple syrups that I make at home, and I've been comparing them. But it's they're just so different in their own right. So that makes this it's different. But also, I think it's also down to the limes you pick. I mean, there are different varietals of lime out there, and I have found. It's funny. Of course, we have Publix everywhere here, and I go to Publix, and their limes. They have good limes. Nothing wrong with their limes. Yep. But then I go to the Latino supermarkets we have here,
Sedano's or something like that. That's right.
And the limes are all incredibly small, and I use those, and I find those to work much better with a daiquiri as well. And again, nothing wrong. The Publix lime is good, but I find the other limes to be. So I'm not sure what variety lime that is, but I do see a little difference in it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm making it more complex.
I'm probably getting shitty limes.
I've got plenty of those type stores in Miami here, and I'm excited to go find those limes and see. So I'm on it. I wanted to ask you, Dan, before we move off the subject with the cane harvest, is you also picked 48% ABV. And I wanted to ask you, how did you arrive at that as the final number?
Yeah. So when I brought back samples, I had samples at different ABVs. I had some at 50, some at 48, 46, and I tasted a number of people on it, and really it was kind of a collective.
Got it. Okay.
Zero in, but. I think the rum, it's punchy, right? I mean, it can really stand pretty strong and drinks, which I enjoy as well. So I think some people felt, getting 50 and up, it was going to be maybe becoming even too much to where, it maybe becomes a complement to a cocktail, but maybe not a main theme.
Right. So you're trying to balance that out to be,
I think the next natural question is, have you had an aged version of this rum? I don't know if the distillery, I don't know if they ever, age the 100% heavy rum, or if they just don't do that. Is that something that exists?
At this distillery, I don't believe it exists.
Okay.
But I will say that in January, I did put some of that in barrels.
That was the next question.
Go. That's what we were looking for. Okay.
Because I'm like, I got to see what happens here.
Yeah.
I have to see this. And these are going in used barrels, mind you. So they're not, they're used barrels that I have used in the past already.
Okay. So
not
not really... peated casks or anything crazy.
No, don't start there, please.
No. John, I'm going to send you a gift, a surprise gift.
Oh boy.
Peated, finish.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm and you have to drink it and send me video evidence.
We'll stream it.
Do that.
We'll stream it live on Instagram or something.
Deal.
Yeah, no. So I put that stuff in barrels. I'm excited to see what happens. I'm excited. So yeah, maybe I don't know when I'll I'm sure every time I go down there I'll start just tasting it just to see. But yeah. Who knows?
You know what that means. We've got to set up a date 5 years from now. It seems to be our cadence.
Yeah. Check in on those
and see. All right. Well, Dan, I wanted to ask you. You talked about your story with how you found the cane harvest rum through a different distillery in Panama. I know we mentioned previously that Las Cabras has been locked in with you for quite a while now, and that you've been exploring and doing other different things with that in a really successful way. When we talked to you way back when in 2020, I know you were very much on the idea of, Panama, and this is where you're at and this is what you're doing. Have you now considered, or would you consider, looking at other sources outside of Panama at some point in the future?
It's a question I do get asked. I'm going to say often, but I do get asked this question, and I guess kind of like the white rum or unaged rum. I should never say never, right? But no, I'm still on to Panama and very much invested there, and I think being invested in that has brought me to this cane harvest as well. I mean, I think if I wasn't invested, I'm not sure I would have found it or I came out with it. So I'm still, there's a lot for me to, my journey is still has a long way to go in Panama. And so, I can't see if and when I go outside Panama. I mean, very well may, but right now I'm having too much fun discovering these things out there that I think a lot of consumers haven't seen yet.
Now that you've branched out to a second Panamanian distillery, I feel like I don't have that much knowledge of how many rum distilleries there are in Panama. Are there other ones on your list left to explore that you'd consider sourcing from, or maybe you tried them all initially? I'm not sure.
Well, no, I did not try them all initially. I mean, there's I would say three large ones. Mm-hmm. Las Cabras, the one Chichiza we just talked about, and of course Abuelo rum as well. And then you do have you got a really, really small one, and you also have you got two other ones that are smaller in size. So yeah, in terms of I mean, who knows what what their future holds. But I think I'm going to be pretty busy right now with these the new distillery that I'm working with. So, but yeah, there's I think rum, Panama has more to offer than what meets the eye.
Yeah, you got to get a little bit of distillate from that one now, and then you call it trifecta, right? You got the three.
Exactly.
Three blend. Yeah.
I do think it's interesting to give yourself that disciplined focus, on one origin, because I think it's really easy to branch out and, go to lots of other different countries. That's kind of a standard move, I think, for a lot of companies that are, along the same style as yours. But to really go deep in one origin just kind of shows you the surprises it can still have with a rum like this one that comes along.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's I think for me that's why I get excited doing what I'm doing. So I think just kind of uncovering, and for me there's surprises I'm running into myself, and so I think for a lot of people when they taste cane harvest, they're going to be equally surprised that this is from Panama. It's funny. When I blind taste people on it. a lot of people will say, "Oh, is this the juice of the cane? Is this cane juice?" Not thinking it's molasses, and then I do get a small portion of people who will correctly guess molasses. But then it's funny. Some people will go say, "Is this pot still?" which obviously it's not. But so it's fun. It's funny to see how people react without knowing anything about it and trying to, figure out, what is this? And then when I say no, it's molasses and it's column distilled, it's a surprise. So I think it shows some of the beauty that is out there, and that's why I named it Cane Harvest. I think it really does tie it back to that sugarcane that's grown right by the distillery. Or at the distillery, even though it's molasses.
Yeah, but you're right, because we just get so little of that heavy rum that it's hard to compare it to anything else. And I think when I was at the table trying it, I thought the same thing. Oh, it tastes like a pot still. But it's just we just don't get that experience enough of the column still, Spanish heritage. Heavier rums like that, so it's nice to have that in the market now. Well, Dan, it's been good talking to you about all of this stuff, and I consider you one of the OG independent bottlers for rum, right? That's something Will and I talk about often, as we've seen more and more independent bottlers since we last talked to you, and that's a great thing. We love that. And to Will's point, I think, Will, you make a good point there about, Dan, your perspective and how you do things and working within that Panamanian space, but also doing what you do in it and letting us know how you're continuing to explore that is really interesting.
By the way, we maybe buried the lead here. Can people generally find Cane Harvest anywhere they can find other Grander products?
Yeah, it's not quite yet, just because it's so new.
Yeah.
And so we're hopefully in a few months that won't be the case, but we literally just got it in the door. We're pushing it and working with retailers my distributor set and getting it out there. So be patient, but again, if you have your own favorite stores, and that's the best way to get it, is ask them
for it. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Dan, for coming back. It was great, and I'm looking forward to trying this in some more cocktails once my taste buds are back. So, thanks again.
Good. My pleasure. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Rumcast. Hey, if you've been able to try this new rum from Grander, we'd love to hear your thoughts, what you think it tastes good in. Send us an email, host@rumcast.com. That's HOST@rumcast.com. Or you can find us, as always, on social media. John, where can they find us?
At the Rumcast, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. And by the way, I was going to tell you, on social media, I did just see Grander put a drink recipe that's using blackberry syrup and lemon. It seems really good. They call it the High C, but I've never heard of that before, and seems interesting. Have you ever made blackberry syrup?
God, no. That's way too... I mean, I'm sure making it isn't actually that complicated, but if it's more complicated than standard simple syrup, I'm just not going to do it at this point in my, home cocktail making journey. I will say blackberries are among my absolute favorite fruits, of all time ever to eat. I love blackberries. So, and stuff, anything that's blackberry flavor, that sort of thing. So I would be all over if I saw blackberry syrup on a cocktail at a bar, I would be very inclined to order it.
Okay. I mean, it seemed interesting to me. It seemed like a fun drink I hadn't heard of before. But all right, so with that said, reach out to us on social media. Let us know what you think about any of that stuff. Oh, and another thing, Will, before we forget, we're gonna have to talk about our experiment with El Dorado 12, which will be coming soon. So
it was postponed. We were supposed to actually have the happy hour where we do the experiment tonight, but we pushed it back a week because of my struggling taste buds. So hopefully by next week they'll be back, and I'll have some thoughts to add to this whole experiment.
Yeah, so that means you have a little bit more time to get El Dorado 12 if you haven't already,
That's
or
right.
to do the experiment yourself, or to join us for the happy hour next week from the Patreon. We'll tell them more about how they get onto that.
Yeah, it's patreon.com/the Rumcast. So that's patreon.com/the Rumcast. We do happy hours once a month for our cask strength patrons. So there's 2 options. So if you want to sit in on the happy hour and chat with us, hang out, go with the cask strength option. But yeah, John, we've got more coming up. We've got more we're trying to figure out with the Rumcast single cask project. So I had like 3 people in my life all text me out of the blue within like a 48-hour period this weekend saying like, hey, can I get the rum yet? And I was
when
like,
is it coming out? Yeah.
I was like, no, you can't. I wish you could. Still, at least a couple months away at this point. So we're in a hurry up and wait mode on some of the stuff now. Yeah. So yeah.
Is it on a boat yet? Is it?
That's a good question.
It's on a boat.
It might be on a boat. It might not be on a boat. It might be sitting in a warehouse somewhere. So
it's somewhere.
But we know eventually it will be here, and at that point we should be able to accelerate things quite a bit. So stay tuned, more updates to come on that front. But until next time, John, cheers.